if the most indestructible cities in human history were never built at all? They were cut, carved, and hollowed directly out of living rock. While the rest of the world was stacking stones and hoping for the best, certain civilizations took a completely different approach. They went inward. They dug into cliffs, tunneled through volcanic mountains, and sculpted entire neighborhoods, churches, and kingdoms out of the earth itself. The result? Cities so deeply embedded into the landscape that invading armies could not burn them, earthquakes could not flatten them, and centuries of neglect could not erase them. Today, we are going to 5 of those places. 5 ancient European cities carved into rock that most travelers walk right past, fly right over, or simply never hear about at all. Some of these locations have been continuously inhabited for over 10,000 years. One of them was literally lost to the world for centuries, hidden behind a single gateway and a cliff face. And the last one on this list, number 1, is a place so haunting, so otherworldly, and so deeply layered in human tragedy that the Italian government once tried to erase it from existence entirely. Stay with us until the end, because number 1 will genuinely change the way you think about what a city is, what survival looks like, and how deep human determination can actually go. Rock-carved architecture is not primitive. That is the first misconception to drop. The civilizations that built these cities were not lacking resources or knowledge. They chose rock because rock is permanent. It insulates in summer, retains heat in winter, withstands siege, and never rots. In many ways, carving into a mountain was the most sophisticated construction decision a civilization could make. This practice emerged independently across multiple cultures in southern Italy, central Turkey, the Caucasus Mountains of Georgia, and the sun-baked cliffs of Andalusia. Each civilization arrived at the same conclusion through different pressures: invasion, climate, geography, or pure survival instinct. What connects all 5 cities on this list is not just stone, it is stubbornness. These were people who looked at an immovable rock face and saw not an obstacle, but a blueprint. Now let us meet them, starting with number 5. Number 5. Monemvasia, Greece. Imagine a city that you can see from the mainland, but cannot reach except through a single narrow causeway. And even then, you would have no idea what is waiting on the other side. That is Monemvasia, sitting off the southeastern coast of the Peloponnese in Greece. This fortress city is built entirely onto and into a massive solitary rock that rises straight out of the Aegean Sea. The name itself tells you everything. Monemvasia literally translates to single entrance. One way in, one way out. That was not an accident. That was a military decision made over 1,000 years ago, and it worked. Founded in 583 AD as a refugee from Slavic invasions, Monemvasia became one of the most strategically impenetrable cities in the entire medieval Mediterranean. Byzantine emperors, Frankish crusaders, Venetian merchants, and Ottoman commanders all wanted it. Several of them took it, but none of them could ever fully break it, because the rock itself was the defense. Walls built into vertical cliff faces. Streets are so narrow that 2 people can barely pass each other. Buildings constructed directly against and into the stone, making the entire lower town effectively invisible from the sea. At its peak, in the 13th century, Monemvasia was a major trading hub, exporting a powerful sweet wine called Malmsey that was drunk across royal courts from England to Constantinople. The poet Yanis Ritsos was born here. The city breathed culture and commerce from inside its rock fortress. Today, the lower town is still inhabited, one of the very few genuinely medieval settlements in Europe, where people actually live, not just visit. Walking through it feels less like tourism and more like trespassing through someone else's century. Number 4. Setenil de las Bodegas, Spain. Most cities are built under a sky. Setenil de las Bodegas is built under a rock, and the residents would not have it any other way. Tucked into the Cadiz province of Andalusia in southern Spain, Setenil de las Bodegas is a small white village where the houses do not sit beside the cliffs. They sit underneath them. Massive overhanging rock shelves stretch directly above the streets, above the doorways, above the caf tables where locals drink their morning coffee. In some streets, the rock face is the ceiling. Residents have simply built their front walls, windows, and doors into the open face of the overhang, and the mountain does the rest. This was not an aesthetic choice. It was a survival strategy born from centuries of conflict during the Moorish occupation of southern Spain. The natural overhangs provided shelter from both the elements and enemy fire. The town itself sits carved into the gorge of the Trillo River, and the deeper you walk into the village, the more completely the rock swallows the architecture around you. The name gives away another layer of history. Bodegas means wine cellars. The constant temperature maintained by the rock overhangs made these caves and alcoves ideal for storing wine and food for centuries. The rock was not just a roof. It was a refrigerator, a fortress, and a foundation all at once. Spanish forces under Ferdinand and Isabella famously struggled to capture Setenil for 15 years during the Reconquista before finally taking it in 1484. A town of a few thousand people held off a kingdom because the rock made them nearly impossible to dislodge. It is still there, still inhabited, still unbothered. Number 3. Vardzia, Georgia. In the southern reaches of the Caucasus Mountains, carved into the face of a volcanic cliff above the Monemvasia River, there is a city that most of the Western world has never heard of, and that is genuinely their loss. Vardzia is a cave monastery complex in southern Georgia, constructed in the 12th century under the reign of Queen Tamar, one of the most powerful rulers in Georgian history. And when we say constructed, we mean excavated. Over 13 levels of cliff face, Georgian workers carved out more than 500 cave rooms, chambers, churches, libraries, wine cellars, throne rooms, and tunnels connecting them all like a vertical underground city. At its peak, Vardzia housed up to 50,000 people within its rock walls. Queen Tamar built Vardzia not just as a monastery, but as a fortress refuge against the Mongol invasions sweeping across the region. The entire complex was designed to be invisible from a distance. The caves faced inward, hidden behind the cliff face, accessible only through concealed tunnels. From across the valley, you would see nothing but rock. Inside, an entire civilization was functioning. In 1283, a catastrophic earthquake shattered the outer rock face and exposed the caves to the open air for the first time. What had been hidden was suddenly visible. The strategic advantage was gone overnight, and Vardzia never fully recovered its former scale. What remains today is still staggering. The frescoes inside the main cave church, painted during Queen Tamar's reign, still hold their color after 8 centuries. A small community of monks still lives within the carved chambers, maintaining an unbroken thread of habitation stretching back over 800 years. Vardzia did not just survive history, it absorbed it. Number 2. Cappadocia, Turkey. There is a landscape in central Turkey that looks so alien, so completely unlike anything else on Earth, that NASA scientists have used it as a reference point for studying the surface of Mars. But what makes Cappadocia truly extraordinary is not what is above the ground. It is what is underneath it. Cappadocia sits on a vast plateau in the Anatolia region of Turkey, shaped over millions of years by volcanic eruptions from the nearby Mount Erciyes and Mount Hasan. The eruptions deposited thick layers of soft volcanic rock called tuff across the entire region. Wind and rain then carved that stuff into the spectacular towers and pillars locals call fairy chimneys, hundreds of them rising across the valley like a fossilized forest. Ancient peoples looked at those soft towers and realized something immediately. They could be hollowed out by hand, and hollow them out they did on a scale that still defies comprehension. Beginning as far back as the Hittite period around 1800 BC and accelerating dramatically during the early Christian era, the inhabitants of Cappadocia carved not just homes and churches, but entire underground cities into the tuff. The most staggering of these is Derinkuyu, an underground city that descends 18 floors below the surface, 18 floors downward into the earth. It contained living quarters, stables, wineries, oil presses, communal kitchens, schools, churches, and a dedicated ventilation shaft system supplying fresh air to every level. Derinkuyu could shelter up to 20,000 people at a time and could be sealed from the inside using enormous circular stone doors that rolled across the tunnels. Early Christians fleeing Roman persecution, and later, Byzantine communities escaping Arab raids retreated into these underground cities and lived there for months at a time. The rock protected them from armies that had no idea where they were. Above ground, the fairy chimney dwellings tell an equally layered story. Over 3,000 rock-cut churches have been identified across Cappadocia, many still containing frescoes from the 9th and 10th centuries. The G. Open-Air Museum alone contains more than 30 of these carved churches within a single valley. Cappadocia is not a collection of curiosities for tourists to photograph from hot air balloons. It is one of the most complex, continuously inhabited, and strategically engineered rock landscapes ever created by human hands, and most visitors only ever see the surface. Number 1. Matera, Italy. In 1952, the Italian government declared an entire city a national disgrace. They called it the shame of Italy. The prime minister stood before parliament and announced that its inhabitants were to be forcibly removed and relocated to modern housing blocks, their ancient homes sealed, abandoned, and forgotten. The city they were trying to erase had been continuously inhabited for over 10,000 years. It was the third oldest continuously inhabited settlement in the entire world. And for a brief period, the government almost succeeded in killing it. That city is Matera, located in the Basilicata region of southern Italy. Matera is built into and around a dramatic ravine system called the Gravina. For millennia, its inhabitants carved their homes, churches, cisterns, and streets directly into the golden limestone cliffs. These dwellings are called sassi, literally meaning stones, and they stack upon each other in impossible layers. The roof of one cave home becoming the courtyard of the one above it, descending deep into the ravine in a vertical cascade of carved rock that looks less like a city and more like something dreamed. The sassi were not primitive shelters. They were engineering achievements. Matera's inhabitants developed a sophisticated rainwater harvesting and cistern system beneath the city that collected, filtered, and distributed water across the entire settlement with extraordinary precision. Archaeologists have identified over 1,500 cisterns carved into the rock beneath the streets. The system was so advanced that it functioned without modern intervention for thousands of years. But by the 20th century, extreme poverty had turned the sassi into overcrowded slums. Families of 10 were living in single cave rooms alongside their livestock. Malaria was widespread. Carlo Levi's devastating memoir, Christ Stopped at Ebola, published in 1945, exposed the conditions to the rest of Italy and horrified the nation. When Prime Minister Alcide de Gasperi visited and issued his declaration of shame, 15,000 people were forcibly evacuated over the following decade. The Sassi were locked shut. Then something unexpected happened. The world looked closer and realized what Italy had almost buried. Writers, architects, historians, and filmmakers began arriving. Pier Paolo Pasolini filmed his version of the Gospel of Matthew here in 1964. Mel Gibson chose Matera as the setting for Jerusalem in The Passion of the Christ in 2004. In 1993, UNESCO designated Sassi a World Heritage Site. In 2019, Matera was named a European Capital of Culture. The people the government tried to erase from history are now welcoming the world into their ancient carved city, a city that survived invasion, abandonment, government erasure, and 10,000 years of everything the world could throw at it. The rock held. It always does. Five cities. 5 civilizations that refused to be erased. They did not build upward chasing skylines. They carved inward, into the permanent, into the unbreakable. Monemvasia, Setenil de las Bodegas, Vardzia, Cappadocia, Matera. Each one a reminder that human survival is not about comfort. It is about commitment to a place, a people, and a way of living that no army, no earthquake, and no government decree could permanently destroy. If this script opened a door you did not know existed, share it with someone who still thinks history is boring. Subscribe, because we are just getting started.